the James City County Board of Supervisors to order for purpose of a work session. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
All present.
Okay. Our board discussions this evening start with our 2021 legislative agenda, and we have about a 50% quorum, so we'll go ahead and start if that's all right with everyone. Everybody should have received a copy of the legislative program. It was two-sided. It had 7 items on the front, which was legislation introduced on behalf of the county, and then the second half was 7 items again, which was legislation or positions supported by the county. We're primarily interested in looking at the ones on the part 1, the front, to be introduced on behalf of the county. And I will we'll go through them. I assume that everybody has read them. Yes. So I will dispense, if it's all right with you all, with the reading of these, unless somebody wants me to read them as we go through. Nope. Everybody has a copy in front of them. Our first one is distribution of online sales tax by physical address. And I wanted to, I said we had a note here that Delegate Mullen said this was also on York's agenda and will be carried by their delegate. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct. Delegate Mugler from Hampton and York County has agreed to be able to carry this bill on behalf of the members of the Historic Triangle.
Okay, wonderful. So that was requested last year, and I guess this request stems from the difficulties in apportioning tax payments when Williamsburg encompasses 3 localities. So that would be helpfully covered by.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So that's huge, and we talked about it last year, particularly for outlets that are in Williamsburg, right?
Yeah.
But not. So do we understand how we're going to fix it? I understand there's going to be a bill, but what are the mechanics of actually making this work?
Question.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I am loath to speak on behalf of Delegate Mugler, but I believe that she was coming up with 2 separate ways of being able to do that. First, that it would be on the retailers themselves to apportion taxes properly. There are other jurisdictions throughout the U.S. that already allow for that. So most of the large online retailers are able to accomplish that. It's just an additional regulatory hurdle. And so there's going to be some questions as to whether or not that's something that the Commonwealth wants to put on additional retailers here in the Commonwealth. But it would be an additional regulatory hurdle in the way that it was originally written. There are other ways of being able to do it. You can certainly do it by street address. And I would defer to John a little bit about some of the other alternatives, but I believe that Delegate Mugler was thinking about it in terms of placing the impetus on the retailer.
John, would you?
I'm wondering why everybody's looking to me, because I don't think this was mine.
I didn't, John.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to be difficult, but if you live in Kings Mill, you know, Jones Way, 231, what is that, 88?
85. Kings Mill.
85, it's 85. Kings Mill's 85?
Yes.
All right, so am I in the city of Williamsburg, 85.
Right.
So how do you make a distinction between Bayberry Lane, 23185 in Williamsburg and a street through the woods here in Kings Mill? And so that's the reason I ask. I don't think we necessarily have the answer, but just having worked in e-commerce in my past, I don't know what the designation is going to be that allows Orvis to because the key is collecting James City County taxes versus Williamsburg versus York from the get-go, and then remitting it to the proper place. I don't know how Orvis e-commerce knows to charge James City County versus Williamsburg and to remit accordingly. So,
And I think the notion is with the provision of the address as the main locus for the tax, then you have the ability to check not on whether that street address is in the city or the county.
And Mr. Chair, that's correct. What happens is that based on the address, it's an automated process whereby they check it against GIS data that is regularly understood. It is an additional regulatory hurdle, And so most of the discussion is going to be on whether or not this is too much to ask of business. I can tell you that there are many jurisdictions across the United States that already require this, but I believe we would be one of the second or third in the South to make such a requirement.
So I know at one point, the Commissioner of Revenue in the city of Williamsburg had talked about, do we need a zip code change for the historic triangle instead? Because you get into the county of York too with 23188. And so it's three jurisdictions that all share a similar, a zip code. So, but that is something I believe that has to be done on a federal level. But instead of, at some point we have to figure it out instead of just keep punting it and saying, well, it's a lot of work on the business. It is, but if we're losing a lot of revenue, then maybe we need to try to figure out a solution to try to.
Yes, so my recollection of our discussion of this in the past, when I've read about it in various state government journals, is that it's not as if we're currently in a situation where all the 23185 revenue goes to the city of Williamsburg. It's simply that there are some businesses that are misclassified, and that having the street address allows you to correct that. Which isn't possible if all you've got is available to you is the zip code. So I think that by and large that they're actually pretty accurate. It's at the margins that the differences really apply. But it would be helpful if we had some information about what we're actually finding in terms of
Right.
mistakes.
And
I know we've had that situation in the past, and we have had post distribution corrections. So we could get that information.
And
Sure, from the
Mr.
commissioner.
Chair, I can tell you that for the large online retailers, this is not a difficult proposition. The Amazons of the world already do this pretty routinely, and so the further allocation is not going to be the difficulty. It's going to be the smaller online retailers who perhaps don't go through a larger hub. So if you are a retailer through Etsy, for example, that shouldn't be a problem because Etsy knows how to be able to do this. But if you have your own independent business, that could be an additional regulatory hurdle. I know that there had been discussion within this group at one point about there being a possible study that could be done by JLARC or another joint organization. And I believe that we're not the only ones who are dealing with this. Anytime you have a fully surrounded city within a county or another jurisdiction, you're going to find things like that. I could think of Frederick County and Winchester a lot as being where they're cross purposes when it comes to taxation. So this is a Commonwealth-wide problem. And so I would defer to Senator Mason and to Delegate Batten, but I don't believe that there has been a study up until this point, but that could also be another avenue.
I'm just curious, is it possible for us to get the numbers and see, how much James City is collecting that should be going to Williamsburg or York County and vice versa? Because if places like Amazon and Etsy are already doing it, I'm just curious, what that looks like. And I think ultimately a zip code change would probably be the most.
So we could probably
Effective
ask
way to
Ms.
kill it
Day
all,
how
but
much we
that's
get
federal.
back, how much we exchange back and forth and get that to you.
And of course, there's administrative costs associated with that as well, I'm sure.
There's always a cost.
Okay, so it looks like that ought to be an interesting one for the legislature to grapple with. But we're happy that it has been picked up by Delegate Muckler, so that will appear, I guess, when we start the session. Our second one is amend the Virginia Code to allow localities to prohibit e-cigarette stores from locating within 1,000 feet of a public school. We requested last year, and I don't think anybody picked it up, and I'm not sure where we are on it again this year. So I'll see if there was any back from our delegates.
Mr. Chair, I guess one of the questions I always ask for something like this is, what's the problem that we're trying to solve here? where's the bad actor who has not been able to be sufficiently punished?
Yeah, I think I originally asked for this to be put on our agenda, and the reason was because of a couple of constituents who had children at Lafayette High School had suggested that there were vape shops close enough that it was a problem. I'm not sure that the distance involved here is long enough, but you know, it was really to address a concern that constituents brought forward about the proximity at location high schools.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that shopping center near Lafayette in particular, and whether or not that's within 1,000 feet or not. But
I think there was one up near Toano Middle School that was very close to the school.
One in Norwich? Talk about the one in Norwich?
Yeah, Norwich.
I think it's further away
There's,
than that.
no, it's actually in Toano Middle School. It's up toward, it was up toward toward the fire station from the school. Thought there was one in there.
This one
There's a
may,
about at the
convenience store
market?
there,
The market there?
McLean's.
McLean's Market?
is that a vape shop, or is that just sort of a convenience store,
Convenience store,
bodega?
yeah.
You know.
there's a little vape store not too far, across from my office.
Okay.
But, you know, this may be a moot point if ends up that the marijuana laws get passed. The cigarette thing may not be as big a deal as it was years ago. Just my 2 cents.
Oh my Lord.
Further. Number 1-3, amend the Virginia Code to require absentee votes be reported by precinct when there are more than 25 such votes cast in that precinct. I think that it was this rules we operated under this election, and the outcome was such that, you know, basically everybody who voted early, not just the absentees, but the early in-person voting, are all wound up in a central absentee. And so, you know, you basically had 65 to 70% of the votes cast not identified by any precinct.
Excuse me.
Our understanding is that that if we had asked at the local level for them to go do something about it, that would be very labor intensive. I think there's a relatively simple way to fix it, you know, even if it means that when you have your absentee ballots come in, when I went in and voted, you know, there were multiple machines. If you say, all right, what precinct are you in, go to that machine, or go to that machine, so that, you know, you basically, when you put your ballot into the machine, it's tabulated in your precinct, and it would make the precinct results more meaningful than they are right now. Because right now, the data you get out of this last election is basically meaningless, except on a countywide level.
That's right.
So I carried this legislation earlier this year, and I'm happy to carry it again. I would change it from 25 to 100, just because that's very low. Everyone was horrified by this because they imagined printing different ballots. There was a cost attached to it, but at the same time, I'm glad I carried it because I think it kind of raised awareness before we even got to the point where we are right now. I've already heard some other folks talking about this. I've talked about it with the registrar in York County. My inclination is to carry it, as I said, but to maybe make it not go into effect this year or the next election cycle, but the year after that. And the reason I say that is because we have redistricting. We're going to have it on the local level. I don't know when all that's going to occur, if we'll have splits, and it might just be a little ambitious to attack it this year. But I think going forward that there is a little bit more interest in this, because as you said, the data is not particularly helpful at this point. So I'll be happy to carry it, but I do intend to change that to 100 and then push it out into the following year.
You would attach a date to it?
Right. So instead of it, you know, going into effect July 1 of 2021, then I would push it back to probably the following year.
I think just getting it visible and getting it started is what's really important for us, because it's been, up until now, it's been more of an irritant because of the lower levels, but now it's a major problem given the way that the voting went to this time and how it's set up. So,
And other states have been doing this long before we
Yes,
have, so certainly we can go to school on how other states have done it and tackled it, but I'll tell you what, our registrars did an amazing job throughout the course of this entire year. Multiple primaries, many changes in voting rules and laws and regulations, a presidential, so we definitely want to fix it at the state level and not individually and taxing individual registrars, by locality, but we should all take a minute to thank the registrars and the great work that they've done in James City County and across Virginia.
Well, you can thank them by helping to fund them, because many of the changes that were put through came with absolutely no help to localities. And I mean, I applaud that you want to make it easier for people to vote, et cetera, but they were coming 1, 2, I mean, our registrar, I went in there and I mean, she basically said, you need to come see what we're facing. And they were facing an incredible workload in a short amount of time, and with changes happening all the time. And we really need some help there. I mean, they need some help with their salaries. That's a great place to start, instead of always looking to us to do that. So I hope that's something that the General Assembly will take on. If you're going to keep putting, doing some different things as far as voting goes, I hope that looking at that position is something that is also looked at.
Well, I have carried that multiple years, trying to
Keep
pay them
carrying
more.
it.
And what would a trip before you be without Ruth saying we hadn't given you enough money to do something? So I'm glad to, but you're right. I went in to see the registrar and they had, 15 people in the back room, socially distanced by table. Everybody had a box. And at least 3 or 4 nights prior to the deadline, they worked until like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Mostly volunteers, but
Right.
as well as the professional staff, that you are exactly correct, that we do not pay them nearly enough money.
I'll tell you, I visited as well, and if were it not for the volunteers, we would not been able to do it. Absolutely not. Our staff was not nearly what would be necessary to accomplish what was accomplished, and it's the citizens of the county that stepped up and helped in the volunteers. So I'll echo Supervisor Larson's comments that we're really lucky to have them, but we need to make sure we can get as much help as we can for them, because I think it really helped. It brought people out. People came out and voted. It's the way that we want them to participate. So I like the setup. It's just we got to work the rough edges off of it as we go.
And Mr. Chair, I would just say that this board also deserves some credit as well for providing additional funding for temporary employees at the registrar's office. I think there were 2 who were hired during that time, and I actually don't know if that was a specific allocation or if that was just sort of finding money in the sock drawer. But it was necessary and it was very important. And I would also give some credit as well to Delegate Batten for bringing this issue up. It was kind of an obscure issue until we hit COVID. And then all of a sudden, she was quite prescient in her understanding of this issue. And now I think everybody's getting on board with something she was already on a year ago.
Thank you for taking it up last year.
Yes, thank you.
As
Thank you.
part of
Yeah.
our package.
And that's another thing that we can look through the postmortem. If you saw what they were doing to put these ballots together, they'd have to have a sticker on one side and then they put it in. They had to have multiple stickers on. It was like a 6-step process per each individual one that they did. And several of the volunteers were saying, it doesn't make sense for us to be doing it this way. And so certainly they have some ideas that hopefully we can make it more efficient for what they have to do in advance of doing it in the future, so.
Well, and part of I don't have the final amount of money from, I know at one point, Ms. Mormon shared that $10,000 had been, I hate to use the word wasted, but because people, instead of doing their absentee ballot, came in because that became a possibility. And so they didn't use so that was $10,000 worth of postage that we won't get back. And so, when you're making changes and changing things sort of, you know, as we're running down the field, you have those things happen. And I think too, you know, there was a lot of media attention about the safety of voting, which also, but I do think that we're going to be, I think now that people have discovered voting early, I think they're going to continue to do that. So we're going to have to look at a larger space. You know, what are we going to do if this is going to be something permanent? So it's not just, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that go into it. So.
Okay, thank you. Our 1-4 is amend section 58-1-1707 of the Virginia Code to increase the annual litter tax imposed upon certain manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, and retailers. There's a new request stemming from a desire to provide more non-local funding for litter prevention and cleanup. I wish we had Greg Borman here to give you, to give you the trash talk, but this was.
Is this people throwing masks away? What is this?
Trash and junk.
No, I think this is basically aimed at the folks who manufacture or generate the items that get discarded. Is that, am I correct in that respect?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The tax is $20 a year for each establishment that has those particular products, and then an additional $30 for establishments that manufacture them. And 95% of those funds go back to the locality for local litter prevention and cleanup. So this stemmed from a meeting in which the board was very interested in litter cleanup. I think we'd heard from Ms. Borman, and the litter numbers were way up, and there was just a desire to try to work on that. So this really goes, I probably could have put them together better. This really does go well with 1-6, which was increase the penalty for allowing the contents to go out. So to Delegate Mullins' point, that's when masks are flying out of the back of trucks, as opposed to being the person that manufactures the bag that the Cheetos come in.
Got it. Thank you.
If you want, we can sort of take them together, because 1-6 on the next below on the page says, essentially it was to increase the penalty for allowing the contents of a vehicle to drop, shift, leak, or otherwise escape on a highway. Current penalty is violations of Class 4 misdemeanor and a fine not more than $250. And this county requests that the code be changed to include a minimum fine of $250. So I know that's one of the primary things that we get around here on the roads is driving along behind somebody and the stuff coming off the truck. And a lot of times it's just a pickup truck and it's out of the bed of a pickup truck or something. But we get a lot of that. It seems to be the problem. So those two are sort of two different ways to approach the litter. One was from the manufacturing level. One was from the enforcement of litter code. If there's any interest part of our leaders to look at something like
Moving right along.
You want to let them squirm a little longer? Okay. The other one we had was, and I'm going to read this one very quickly to talk about. This is about Virginia amending the code to allow local governments the option to require sprinklers in residential buildings. And I will defer to Mr. Hippel since this is his area. I believe we have certain things similar in the northern part of the state.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little deeper on, and we're working on it with TPO and PDC and all that, and some of the, across Virginia, the code is the code, and I'm gonna compare it to like the hunting code. You've got a hunting code that says you can do this and this and this, but then the county can add something to that. Like in James City County, if you're going to fire a rifle, you have to be elevated at least 10 foot. You can't have a loaded weapon in your vehicle during hunting season. You have to unload that at least one out of the chamber. It can be in the bottom, but the chamber cannot be loaded. So those are ones that we've added to, and the state has added, or James City County has added to the codes of hunting. Now on code and compliance codes, of course, the code is statewide, but the counties and cities can't add anything to it. And it came up with, we were talking about flooding in Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Portsmouth and all that. And I said, well, you know, I can understand if we take something, and this related to the same item, but if we take something in the code and change it to, okay, you have to be X amount over freeboard for flooding and that sort of thing, then, you know, it's some areas it will affect and some areas it won't affect. Like in Roanoke, the chance of Roanoke flooding and the chance of Norfolk flooding are two different stories. So it really all be tailored to the area, not to the statewide. So it really should be something. I was thinking sprinklers in James City County, just because we lost a gentleman in Forge County recently, you know, from a fire. And if we had sprinklers, maybe, we'd never know, but maybe that could have prevented that where that sprinkler went off. So it's allowing the counties and the cities a little bit more leeway to add one or two. It may be okay, we have to have permission to add this to it, but it would at least give us the power to go, okay, we don't have the issues that Norfolk and Virginia Beach has, but we have different issues in James City County that we'd like to address different from other localities. You know, further out west and all that, they have a different need than what we would in James City County. So it'd be give each locality the ability to add a couple things to the state required code and compliance in order that would fit their community a little tighter. So when I brought this forward, it was the sprinkler systems. But then as we got further discussions down in the commission seats, I looked at that and said, hey, you know, each one of us have a different thing. We don't have a brush that paints it all. So we may need individual brushes to paint each one of our jurisdictions. So that was my thought. It's written different than I presented it tonight because of after we had this, we had the other discussions. And I said, you know, tonight I'm going to bring that up as well, how maybe we ought to be able to tailor our codes a little different in each community. Think about.
I know that over the last few years, this commission, there's always a big battle that the firefighters want to add more folks to it. They feel like they are grossly underrepresented. The builder and the number of business community interests do tend to control it. And so, you know, I mean, like, you may have heard about the battle over having mulch up against your property.
Oh, my God.
I mean, that was an enormous fight because they've had mulch, you know, start fires outside. Yep. And so I do know that, you know, local option here is probably helpful, but I can tell you that one right there will have a line of folks to address it, to try to understand it further, and probably not too thrilled with it. But you know, the local option side of it, I think, is very interesting. I think your hunting analogy is outstanding.
Thank you.
You know, I mean, so that's an interesting way to approach it.
Yeah, we're doing it now. It's just doing it in a different way and doing it in another avenue. And that way it'd give communities, you know, they would come in front of their boards or their city councils and they could move their point forward. I think we need this, or I don't think we need this, and allow the communities themselves to add to the state code, because the state code is bare minimum, and it would add to it and just raise that level up if they wanted to. If they found that there was an issue within their community, an older community, you know, there may be, okay, if we're going to rehab this older community, we may want to watch codes on this. Or if we have flooding issues, you know, there's areas we flood in James City County, but nowhere near like Norfolk and Virginia Beach are, you know, fighting and wrestling with how do they stop it and what can they do and that sort of thing. So, you know, and they were pushing down there to have the regulations come up across the state as a whole. And I was like, no, that doesn't, you know, it doesn't fit everyone. So something to think about as you go through your processes. Nothing that I need an answer on, or I'll carry this, or, you know, maybe something that you talk to your colleagues and go, yeah, we can work something like this in, or we can have that little mobility for the counties and cities to be able to make these decisions. Thank you.
Okay. And our number 1-7 is to amend the code to explicitly give boards of supervisors the ability to impose sunset clauses on use permits. And the interesting thing here that we found out, and I think Delegate Mullen has looked at this and he's talked to our county attorney, is that there are certain things that are already allowed to our Board of Zoning Appeals, but not to the Board of Supervisors. And so this would be an opportunity to basically give us essentially the same authority that we would have for our Board of Zoning Appeals. And there are some cases where I think it would be very beneficial for us, because there are many times that we sit up here and look at SUPs or things like that, and you realize that these go on forever with the land. And there are some uses where it might be beneficial for the public and the community to reevaluate some of these at various points, so that it wasn't forever. It would have essentially an opportunity to put a sunset clause on something. And I think, Delegate Mullen, you've already had a conversation with our county attorney on it. Would you like to comment on it?
Yeah, I actually am kind of shocked by this code provision. Yeah, this needs to be changed. I'm happy to carry it. It has been a long time since I took agency law, though. And I thought it was a basic principle that an agent cannot have power greater than that of their principal. And yet somehow we have put into code that the Board of Zoning Appeals has authority greater than that of the Board of Supervisors that they answer to?
Actually, the delegate, the Board of Zoning Appeals is appointed by the circuit court judge. And so they sit as a quasi-judicial body. And so I will say there are some of my colleagues that would make the argument that you do, and at least half of my colleagues make the argument that I've made to this board, which is that they're totally separate. And the General Assembly meant to make them separate and gave them separate powers. It's a strained argument, though, when you look at it and go, well, it's the board that's delegating the powers to this body, even though that body is separate. But I just read it. The code seems clear to me. So this would definitely help clear up an inconsistency that a lot of us local government attorneys wonder about. I don't know that there's ever been a case that's come up where a Board of Supervisors has put a sunset clause on something and it was overturned due to that. So I just didn't want to be the test case.
We can fix this.
That basically covers our first items, and on the back side we have the things that are supported by the county. One of my favorites is Airport Road, Richmond Road intersection improvements. VDOT actually came up with a very nice plan that, believe it or not, entails another traffic circle, removes the traffic light. But in looking at it, I think their plan actually does have a reasonably good chance of eliminating what is one of the worst backlogs of traffic on our roads right now. If you want to, about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, if you want to try to come in Airport Road and cross Moortown and get onto Richmond Road, forget about it. It's just, it's unbelievable.
Would the roundabout be on Richmond Road, or would it be at
The
that?
roundabout, what they were
that
proposing to do
cross-section
is
right
to
on the other side of the-
replace the intersection of Moortown and Airport with a roundabout, where it's a
On the-
traffic light.
On the other side of the train track.
Yeah, so on the other side of the train tracks, if you're headed that way. What it would do is, right now you have, the way the traffic lights are cycled, it's 4 different cycles. And heavy traffic flow comes down Moortown Road. They make a right turn. They fill up the queue all the way between the 2 roads there by the railroad tracks. And then the people have a single lane, and most of them are turning left. And so they have to wait for the traffic light. If you had, I always talk to say, if you could put an extra lane in there, you could get people to go around them and turn right. That would alleviate some of the congestion. But in looking at it, the VDOT, our local VDOT people did the traffic engineer study and came up with this idea and made a pretty compelling case that they could really reduce the congestion and backlog. It's a pretty complex engineering solution that they have. The problem we have right now is we got a solution. We just don't have funding.
How much does it cost?
Question. Probably. I doubt seriously that this thing would be less than at least a couple, $2 or $3 million.
Probably talking about something that Senator Mason talks about a lot, which is that you have something that is not yet at the level in which it would be able to get the statewide funding through the rating process, but we have a lot of these sort of middle-sized projects that are just backing up entirely.
The only place I could see that they would get a congestion mitigation on this one, because this is one of the worst that we have in the county right now. So, I just wanted
May
to
I ask Mr. Hippel a question?
Yes, sir.
Where would we get, what level would we get to start talking about a project like this?
I would imagine by the time it goes through the committees and everything else, you're looking at 6 to 10 years out, I would say, to even get the funding necessary. Paul, wouldn't you agree? We're probably 6 to 10 years out, just looking at if we can get the funding and just depending on if we can compete with Smart Scale and all that. And, and the thing about it is let's see, last year we had, I think it was $800 million worth of projects submitted to Smart Scale, and we had 400 million able to use. So, we're double of what we even was even available to use out there. And, and with the ranking system, it's a good ranking system and it works out well, but there's just no funding. I mean, the state has no money. I mean, to be serious, there's no money that it can, extra money to spend on anything right now as far as, our saving grace was HR TAC and the taxing that we did and what we put in place has done so well on transportation. So we've been very lucky there. The citizens have come through amazingly, all the jurisdictions coming together. That is a gold star for the state of Virginia, that program right there. And I told Secretary of Transportation that program needs to be the star program to use throughout the state of Virginia. If they would sit back and just say, you know what, let's take this program, put it in place in all the jurisdictions and get it working like what we've got there as a standard, it would solve a lot of extra transportation issues and get them going quicker. I mean, we're at 5.5 billion in funds right now in that program. That's a lot of money. That's more than the state has. And,
Work
we've got
you've done on that has been incredible. I mean, he has been a leader for this region in making that, in driving the bus on that.
Yep.
I mean, he just told me they brought him some paperwork down at HR TAC the other day. He's down there so much they knew where to find him. So, I mean, he's just done amazing job for our region and the state. But when that bill passed, Vivian Watts stood up on the floor of the House and said, look, I'm not going to be here. And this makes a lot of sense using Smart Scale. But what you're going to have in the future are projects like that. And we've always talked about 60 going down through Grove. That is those places are never going to Smart Scale.
Yep.
And so now the transportation bill we just passed will put some more money in the coffers. But that, so Smart Scale is outstanding. I mean, and the HR tax and the different regional transportation structures have been incredibly effective. But that's why I ask you how you get down to a level like this that is so necessary, does back up so much. But as far as Smart Scale goes, I don't know if it ever makes it.
I don't think it ever will. And, which is a shame, but not only us, but every jurisdiction out there is having this exact same issue. The funds just aren't there and figuring out how to fund it and how to put it in. And that's why I'm so proud of, all the jurisdictions and what they've done with HR TAC, because we're actually putting the funds to use and getting roads out there. I mean, just driving down Interstate 64 now, you don't have to worry about it like we did before. And when we get that new tunnel in after 2025, that's going to be a blessing to get to Virginia Beach and everywhere else. But it's taken, and if we we talked about the other day, if we had have gone ahead and instead of 0.7 cents, we'd have done 1 cent, we would have ended up being able to buy the Elizabeth River crossing, which I wanted to buy, so we could put it in our network and put that funds back in to what the roads are doing here rather than going across the seas and having somebody else own it. We should have owned that project here, and we should have been in charge of it, and we could have taken that money and put it back into roads. And that's where we're, sometimes we miss that. We get a little shiny money up here in front, but for 70 years, we're paying for that. That's a long daggone time. So that was, I won't say what it was. That was interesting.
Since we're talking about transpo, this is a little side note it's not about Airport Road, but I just wanted to thank Delegate Batten. She's going to be on a Zoom call with myself and several others this week with our VDOT representative. We're having some issues in certain areas of the county, particularly Ms. Larson's district and mine, where we're having a little bit of difficulty with just getting some speed limits reduced. I don't think that's going to be a 10-year, $5 million proposition just to get some speed limits lowered just for the safety. We've got down at, just recently on Route 30, Barnes Road, there was a horrible accident. A couple of young people just got killed a couple weeks ago. You look at the VDOT study, just up to 2019, there'd be 32 accidents in that one spot. And just to get some speed limits reduced seems to be a little cumbersome. So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to be on that Zoom call with us, but just as a little FYI, we're probably going to be reaching out to several of you to try to help us just to navigate through some of these areas that, and I know, as I said, Ms. Larson has an issue in Berkeley, but even in front of Stonehouse Elementary, I've been asking for a stoplight there for 6 years, and there's no funding there after we've had repeated calls from parents about accidents in front of that school. Now, mind you, I don't think, sorry, I can't talk with this thing. I don't think this year, since the schools have been online, I haven't heard of any accidents right there. So it's obviously an issue in front of that elementary school when school's in session, because you've got Williamsburg Christian Academy there, you've got Stonehouse Elementary, it's 55 miles an hour, you've got Whitehall's being built out, you've got more traffic, you've got the neighborhoods across the street, and as soon as one of those bangs happened, let me tell you, my phone starts going crazy. So I know, I'm sure Ms. Larson would agree that we need some help from everyone. Just to get some speed limits reduced would be wonderful. But I still am pounding for a stoplight in front of that school. And they've done the studies. They say it's not warranted, but as accidents continue to happen, it makes it very difficult for us. So anyway, just putting that out there since we're talking about a little bit of transpo here. Thank you.
Okay,
Can I add one more?
absolutely.
And with the traffic lights, there's 3 I know we need in our area. 1, 2, and mine is 3. So there's 3, but at those 3, those are costing us $500,000 a piece for a traffic light. Every traffic light that goes up is costing it's unbelievable the cost of a traffic light. But that's $500,000, that's 1.5 million right there, and 3 traffic lights. And you get your citizens ask you, why can't we get a traffic light? When we used to string them on a line between poles, it was fairly cheap. But now that we're using all the other poles and the hurricane-proof stuff and everything else, it's gotten up because there's only 2 manufacturers of those poles in the United States. And one went under, is trying to get back up. So there leaves 1 left in the United States that makes those poles. So that's why the cost is expensive as well. So, just something to think about. Every time we add one, it's $500,000.
And these are dangerous intersections that we're
They are.
talking about.
They are very important.
They're dangerous.
Before I forget, I know the one you're talking about at Barnes, and then
Barnesville.
of course the Stonehouse one. I know yours. What's the one in Powhatan?
Jolly Pond in Centerville,
Okay.
and that's warranted for a
Yeah.
traffic light. But once again, we don't have the funding because when the school lets out and everything, in and out, but we don't have the funding to put it in right now. But it's warranted for one.
There are a couple that are terribly underutilized in our county that I've told Supervisor Hippel he could go out and midnight requisition one, but
Take the one in front of the pottery. We got 2 there. We could take one.
Exactly. Let's just move it.
It's just a very, if you came and spent a day with the people that live and that deal with the Centerville and Route 5, and Route 5 and Green Springs, and the number of accidents that have happened there. And, and it's very frustrating. Nothing's happening. There's a plan, but nothing's happening. We're having to compete with Virginia Beach, Norfolk, for safety. I mean, I'm sorry that people are backed up on Airport Road, but I've got people that are having automobile accidents. So, but then we get into where we're competing with one another over who's got the unsafest intersection. When it should be, you have an unsafe intersection, you should be able to address it. And, I think VDOT, I mean, Rossi Carroll probably doesn't want to answer the phone anymore, but they do. And I mean, I think they're doing what they can do with the limited amount of money they have. But at some point, you got to pay the piper for pushing things off all the time.
Is that 55 right there?
It's 45.
45 right there.
Yep.
So you'd need to have a stopping distance that'd be pretty significant if you're going to have a full light there.
Pardon?
You'd need to have stopping distance. So you'd need to have,
One of the, I mean, they came out with a number of different options. One would be trying to line up Centerville and Green Springs, or using a roundabout possibly there. That would help slow down traffic as well there. But, it's a very interesting, we've got the National Park Service, we've got some James City County land. There's very little easement. I mean, these roads were not meant for the type of traffic that they're getting. So back when they put the road in, they didn't put in a great deal of easement to be able to do road improvements on. So
unless the county is going to buy an easement.
we have a piece of land over there that was purchased to do away with so that a gas station wouldn't come in. So we do have a little bit of play in that as well. And then, I mean, there's been several people that have tried to help us with doing clean out so that there's better sight. I think the Park Service is willing to work with us as well to try. I mean, they're aware that it's that there's a safety issue, but I mean, it's just, and I will. There's still accidents happening there. We've had a little bit less while school's been out as well. So, but they haven't stopped. And trust me, the minute there's an accident, I get a notification. So.
And with mine involving a school, God help us. I'm just saying. Scary.
Okay, well, I wanted to make sure we touched that one because I knew that there were going to be several issues that folks wanted to talk about. The rest of our part two is pretty straightforward. We had preference for impact fees over cash proffers if we could, moving the primary date from the second to the third Tuesday in June, supporting VML VACO and high growth communities positions, state funding, always asking for more money. Eastern State Hospital surplus property, I think we had, there was some things we would support on that, and then other pending and anticipated legislation. So I'll just leave that since everybody has it to take a look at, and those are things that we just sort of supported, but we wanted to make sure we got through our legislation introduced on behalf of the county, and I want to thank you all for.
Mr. Chairman, could I just say how much I appreciate the work that your staff and team has done on 2.6. Your team has been amazing to work with. They continue to stick through. We've just done a process where we've had an outside group come in and talk to the two parties to see if some sort of joint operation would work there. Senator Norman has been very helpful to keep this moving along. And so I just really appreciate all the work that's been done surrounding this, and there's still a lot more to go. We're a long way from home, but I really believe that could be a transformational opportunity for our region, and the team at James City County has just been on it and outstanding, and I'm very appreciative.
Thank you, Senator May. Okay, I think that basically.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask if I could for some reaction from the members of the General Assembly about what they anticipate in this short session coming up. obviously, obviously, we have just come through a fairly extended special session, and with the limitation on the ability of people to physically interact with members of the General Assembly during the coming session, I just wonder how likely it is that there will be a full kind of agenda, or whether it will be relatively limited. Partly because I know there were some issues that sort of bubbled up during the special session. I think most of them were kind of pushed to the side with the recognition that that wasn't the purpose. I'll just flag one in particular, which was an effort to do a blanket extension of SUPs that had been approved and that had a time frame of three years, for instance, on that localities have generally been addressing those cases when they come up, if there is a need for an extension. We just did one at our last meeting where a solar farm needed an extension on theirs, and it was unanimously approved because of an understanding that things are moving ahead. But I just wonder whether, what we should expect is the need to be as prepared as always for General Assembly session. Obviously, you never know for sure, but or whether there will be a more limited scope of this session.
So I guess I can sort of begin the ball rolling on that question a little bit. The Senate and the House have put on themselves an unprecedented restriction on the numbers of bills that we are going to be carrying. I'm thinking in particular of Senator Surville up in Northern Virginia, who might be having a little bit of a stroke when he can't carry 65 bills. Oh, yes, he will be. So the other thing is that we're going to do this in 30 days. And that means that we're going to be working on weekends, and that means that we're going to be working overnight. And so there are going to be a lot of times where we're working until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, but we're going to get the business of the people done in 30 days. In terms of things to anticipate, I'm sure there's going to be something about SUPs. There seems to be every year. But I think the biggest thing that could be affecting local government is going to be the issue of re-benchmarking for student attendance going in. So we've now continued that until, and I'm sorry, someone correct me if I'm wrong, May, I believe. I don't remember when the last time it is, but that benchmarking is going to have to eventually occur. And so you're going to see jurisdictions that significantly lost student attendance as a result of COVID see significant decreases in their funding. And we've delayed that as much as possible. My hope is that we'll be able to delay it at least another 6 months until we have a vaccine and we can start to see in-person attendance start to tick back up. But I think for localities, that's going to be the biggest issue. I would also say, at least in the House, and Senator Mason can correct me, but at least on the House side, marijuana is going to be a very large issue that will affect state and localities pretty dramatically. And so that's going to be a number of bills, and we're going to see a lot of discussion, I would say, robust discussion on that issue and how, if we are to go forward with marijuana legalization, what that would look like for people who live in our community.
Sorry, could you say one more time, when do you think that the schools will have to do another count in May? Is that what you said?
So we delayed, it was supposed to be, and I'm looking for a lifeline here. I believe it was
September 30 was their first.
Right, and we delayed it, and then we delayed that till March.
Do it in March.
Is it
as
March
well.
or May?
They
I
do
apologize.
September and March.
Okay, so we delayed the September until March.
Okay.
And then the question is going to be whether or not we delay the March until the next September. Now that creates additional costs for the Commonwealth, but it sort of buoys the localities in the interim. And so I would imagine that for localities, that's going to be probably the largest issue when it comes to their finances.
Because we've seen a drop here.
Oh, sure.
So-
I'm not aware of a locality that hasn't seen some sort of a drop. And so I imagine that will be one of the biggest priorities for VACO and VML going forward.
I certainly agree with what Mike said. And to your question, how does it look different? How do you engage this year? We are expecting it to be a much more 24/7 sort of process this year, but our offices are still our offices. So if you're keeping track of the legislative process, you can still reach out at any time. Our aides are there. If you make us aware of a bill that is of concern or that you support that's coming through, we'll be there to keep an eye on it and to let you know when it's coming before committee. If you participated at all during our recent special session, you know that we had a hard time with technology at certain times, and there were quite a few people on both sides of the aisle, constituents and whatnot, who had a hard time giving testimony. So I would encourage you, if you have something you would like to say about a bill, or you really want to make sure that your perspective is heard, to contact a legislator. Maybe don't rely on yourself or your lobbyist to do it, because they might not actually get that opportunity. There were some quirks there. I know I had quite a few people, like I said, both sides of the aisle, who sat in the virtual waiting room for like 4 hours, and then their name got called and no one could actually hear them. So just be aware of that, and we'll kind of, we'll see how it goes. It'll be different this year. And my office is local, so the good thing is if you have something or you want to talk to someone, we'll be around. So you don't actually have to drive to Richmond if you want to meet with your legislator this year. I guess that's good. I'm not sure.
Well, so it's going to be a mess. The House of Delegates is all up for re-election, so there are going to be a lot of bills that are obviously promoted that go along with that concept. Tackling major policy initiatives in a 30-day session seems like a really bad idea. And then we talk about a bunch of bills coming on marijuana and what the future looks like there. So I think it's always important not to rush major initiatives. We just addressed a lot of major initiatives in a special session. Amanda's exactly right. We saw some of the pitfalls. The Senate meets in person. But as far as your interaction with the Senate, it is virtual. And so, yes, we meet in person, and I think that's important for the debate and for the adjustment, and we're trying to figure out how we'll do committees. But at the same time, you'll still have the virtual waiting room, you'll still have Zoom, which gives some people more access. But I think it also brings with it a set of challenges. The SUP question that you had, and I looked into it at your direction, during session, it seems southeastern Virginia had a couple cities that didn't do as well as y'all had done continuing the process on. And so they had requested some extensions just because their groups didn't meet and didn't get to things quite as diligently or as quickly as y'all did. That was the thought process behind that particular one. The good news about, and by the way, thank y'all for the meeting with Regid Bald and the school boards, and I thought that was very useful for us. Mm-hmm. It made the point of we have to be super careful about the count right now. The good news is if you look at the Senate Finance presentation that we just got last week, the red is losing student population. The entire state's red, with the exception of Richmond and Radford. Is that the other? And I think that's where some of the online learning people, which y'all made us aware of. So that was a great meeting that y'all put together. I'm very appreciative of that. There are a lot of big policy initiatives that are out there that I think we will take a long look at and make sure we try to get it right. And it's going to be hard to do that in a 30-day session. What does crossover look like? 15 days? So you have to have all bills that originate in your chamber through committee acted upon into the other chamber in a long 2 weeks. That's a sleep when you're dead situation right there, isn't it? So I think a lot of things will be pushed, but again, she's exactly right. If you see things that jump out at you, as you always do, it's all the more important to just ping us and say, hey, I don't know what this looks like, but from what I'm seeing, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But this will definitely be an unprecedented situation, do it in 30 days, as we used to do. And the budget was just largely adjusted, and we'll see what the governor offers up in a couple of weeks, but the revenue projection certainly will not have changed all that much. So still a long way to go on this thing, but.
And I will say for members of the House, it seems like most members are planning on doing virtual session from their offices. I think Delegate Batten's planning on it. That's what I'm planning on doing. So you can literally just walk down the street and knock on the door and say, hey, because we're going to be there late at night. And Monty, if you ever want to come back to courts, you know, we would love to be able to have you again for 2 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you, sir, but no.
Any other questions from the board or any other
No,
questions or
I did
comments?
want to express my appreciation for any help that was given over the Busch Gardens situation. It's very frustrating to me that Virginia Beach thrived. Outer Banks record attendance, record, and granted, I get it, it's a beach, but what Busch Gardens was proposing was using their outside facility, and I don't feel we were given a shot. We're a tourism economy. This is a scary time. So, and I frankly feel as though we were not heard. And so I appreciate that you tried. You know, we've gotten a little bit, and, you know, people are going. So I'm hoping that we see an uptick, because I think, you know, they're really working on doing it safely. And people, I mean, my neighbors, they've gone like 4 times because they want to be able to do something with their families that's outside, that's being done safely. And so, you know, I go 8 times, please. And so I do appreciate the help that you gave there, because I don't know if you ever go on, visit Williamsburg and look at you know, what's happening with lodging and things like that in the greater region, but it's pretty dismal. And so, and I don't know when we'll start to see, you know, I don't know that it'll be immediate. I think, you know, certainly a vaccine will help. But I have a feeling that until 2022, you know, I don't think we'll see a real uptick in our visitation, but I hope that is proven to be wrong. So I do thank you for any efforts that you put in with that. So
I will say that one of our saving graces was that as the governor reimposed some additional restrictions in the last 2 weeks, that Busch Gardens was not included as a part of
yes,
that, which was the terrifying phone calls that I was making at 2 o'clock in the afternoon trying to find the answer to that. But hopefully Christmastown will at least be the edge where we can start to move forward.
Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We,
Thank you. Thanks very
Very
much.
much.
appreciate you being here.
Good work.
Right. Yeah, let's recess. Okay.
okay, thank you.
Authority Board of Directors for a regular meeting. Good evening, Mr. Powell.
Good evening.
Would you please call the roll?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here. Any presentations?
No, ma'am.
Public comment?
No public comment.
I need a motion then to approve our consent calendar, which is our minutes adoption.
Motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any public hearings?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Board considerations?
We do have a closed session on
All
your
right.
agenda.
So I would ask at this time, if we're going to go into closed session now,
Yes, ma'am.
that anyone who's not participating to please step out into the hallway for a moment. Thank you.
We need a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go into closed session.
So
Thank you.
moved.
Mr. Powell?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel. Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Sake of the record, do we need to
I think you do need to cite.
note the purpose for the closed
Yes.
session?
Okay,
Yes.
closed session, discussion or consideration of the
Acquisition of a sewer easement near North Lake
Oh.
Loring where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position of, or negotiating strategy, oh my goodness, of the public body pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A3, and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the JCSA regarding options for the acquisition of a sewer easement near North Lake Loring, requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A8.
Hold up.
Hang on and make sure we're actually closed.
to a
Certify that-
certification.
Move to certify that we only spoke about those items we indicated we would speak about, which is why we had to speak about them. Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel. Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye. Next, board requests and directives. Anyone?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, indeed.
Anything you want to talk about billing at all?
I was planning to mention that under general manager comments, but I can just go ahead and address that now. So I did notify you last week that there had been some technological issues with HRSD, who does our billing for us. Those issues really occurred at the worst possible time for us. We had sent them our information so that billing could occur in the next day or two when their systems went down. So we have been unable to send bills out at this point due to the technological issues with our vendor. And unfortunately, I can't tell you right now when the bills are going to go out. I had waited as long as I felt like I could to make any public communication outreach efforts because I really would have liked to have had more information about when we will be getting the bills out. But that information is still not available, and I felt like today I had to communicate something. So we have issued through social media, through emails to our customers, for those customers that we have email addresses for. We have made some efforts today just to let people know that bills are going to be late. But exactly when they're going to go out, I'm still not sure. We'll keep you and our customers as informed as best as I can as information becomes available. But I'm under the impression from HRSD that it's going to take some time.
So do you have I mean, is there any type of, let's say we're still here in February. What happens?
Well, if, I think if that were to happen, we would probably, if that were to happen, we'd probably explore some options to try to do our own billing. But it would take a lot, I think, for us to get there, because that would be a pretty monumental effort to do on the fly. So hopefully that's not what we're talking about. I can tell you that last week we were told that they hoped they'd be up by next week, the week of November 30th. But I'm not sure that's going to happen.
In terms of communication through social media, emails, do you happen to know what the percentage of our customers participate in email? Just curious.
I can get that information. I had the email list on my computer this afternoon, but I didn't look to see exactly how many. So, but
especially for things like this, I think it's great that we're able to have a way to get information out to folks quickly.
I think it's a fairly substantial amount, but I can get that information.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, and I bet, we're doing Zoom HOA meetings in my neighborhood, and I will tell you, the age span is great. So I'm sure there's more people getting on email and that type of thing as we go along, because they're finding it's the only, they've got to be able to communicate. So many doctors now are doing, my dad's 80 years old, and they want him to do telehealth. So probably when this is behind us, just another reminder to try to get your email to both the county and to JCSA.
Can I just ask what HRSD has communicated?
They did issue a press release that said they had been the victim of ransomware. Okay. They reassured customers that their operation, in terms of the wastewater treatment, that had not been affected, that they're meeting all their requirements to treat the wastewater. That has not been impacted at all, and that basically all of their systems are down. They're unable to perform the customer service functions, and asked for the customers' patience and apologized for the inconvenience. So that's basically what they've communicated to the public.
Has any of this affected their SWIFT program?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Not that I'm aware of.
Sure they're not. Something they should.
Right.
You never know. Glad I didn't hear then.
Anyone else? Good.
I wish I had more information, but that's the nature of this type of
Yeah.
event, so.
That's a shame.
With that, Mr. Powell, General Manager's update, or was that it?
No, it's just a couple other things,
Okay.
one brief, one maybe not as brief. Briefly, at your next meeting, I am bringing forward a memo and resolution asking you to approve a 2% general wage increase for service authority employees, similar to what Board of Supervisors approved for county employees. So you'll need to take separate action on that as the Board of Directors on December 8th. The other item I did want to talk about is I did send a memo yesterday updating you about a program that was approved in the Appropriations Act by the state known as the COVID-19 Municipal Utility Relief Program. Under this program, $100 million is available to municipal public utilities to assist customers who are delinquent with their utility bill. An application to the State Corporation Commission is due on Monday. I'm planning to submit an application on behalf of JCSA. Board approval is not required for that, but board action will be required subsequently. And at the moment, we're intending to put something on your December 8th agenda or to accept the funds. The action will also require action by the Board of Supervisors. The service authority cannot receive the money directly. It has to go to a county or city. So we're asking James City County to act as our fiscal agent. So as a result, both boards have to take action on this. It's unclear to me at this point how much money we'll be eligible for, but we are going to submit an application and see. Related to that is that the program that was approved by the state prohibits disconnections. And of course, you approved a moratorium on disconnections in March as part of your declaration of emergency. The program that was approved by the state allows utilities to exempt themselves from the moratorium on disconnections if their delinquency is 1% or greater of their operating revenues. Every utility that I'm aware of meets that criteria. So I don't know exactly why that percentage was chosen, but nevertheless, that's where we are. So the Hampton Road Sanitation District staff, they have a board meeting today, and they're going to recommend to their board that they bless the exemption on moratorium, that they remove the moratorium on disconnections. And their purpose behind that is to provide some motivation for customers to actually apply for the COVID relief funds that are available through the CARES Act, because as part of the process, for a customer to be assisted by these funds, they have to self-certify that they have been affected by COVID. So we can receive the funds, but then to be able to credit the customer's account, it does require some affirmative action on the part of the customer. So the HRSD's logic is that by being able to threaten cutoff, that will motivate more customers to seek assistance. And they're willing, and HRSD has generously offered to do that service and door tag customers for the utilities that they bill for. So that is an option for us, that in the coming weeks that HRSD could put door tags on our customers' doors and say, you have the potential to be disconnected, but there is this funding and this assistance that is available. HRSD has also said that they won't put that door tag on our customers' doors if we don't want them to. And so I'm hoping to get some feedback from you as to whether or not you would like for HRSD to provide that service. My recommendation is that, while again, I think it's a generous offer for HRSD, I think it might make sense for some jurisdictions to do it. I'm reluctant to recommend that we do it. I think, number one, our delinquencies are lower than most other utilities. I'm really not sure I mean, and I could be wrong, but I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of money from this, and I don't know that the effort's going to be worth the additional. I don't know the effort's going to be worth the benefit. I'm also concerned that the reason you put the moratorium in place in the first place was because of the public health situation. That situation is worse today than it was when you originally put the moratorium in place. And I also just think people getting a disconnect notice between Thanksgiving and Christmas under the current circumstances is not necessarily a great public relations move. So for those reasons, I would recommend not doing it. But I do I didn't want to make that decision without getting some feedback from you.
But not doing revocation of the mention of disc.
That's correct. That's correct.
And I was curious about, I may not have read the memo closely enough, but what's our normal arrearage?
If you look at the dashboard, and the dashboard is actually on a 90-day basis, so it's a little bit different than what's in here. But our on that dashboard, our arrearage has basically it's doubled. It's gone from about 150,000 to 300,000. So it's roughly doubled. Those numbers are relatively low compared to other utilities.
I'm inclined to agree with you about the not suspending our not revoking our suspension of,
Right.
of disconnects. But there's a real advantage to the homeowner, isn't that right? That if what we're saying is we're not going to disconnect you, but you're still going to have this bill going forward.
That's right, and
Right.
that's and
But
right.
this will pay the bill.
That's correct. Yes, we are required under this. The money has to be spent by the end of January, and so that is, from HRSD's perspective, that's their thinking, is that this is really a benefit to the customer, and they're not looking to turn people off. They just want to have the ability to say that we can in an effort to motivate them. So
I see it as a, not picking on the HRSD, but it's a way for them to get cash in that they don't have now. And then they can tap into this. The only thing I worry about is if you tap into this and you put that in place, then when this funding is done, the owners out there with the possibility that we could be worse off this coming next 6 months than we were the previous 6 months. Now they can be cut off or have to figure out how to pay that. And if they couldn't pay it then, how are they going to get to pay it now? So I see where HRSD is. It's a business move. There's money out there I can get. If I can convince you to apply for it, then that's money coming back into my company,
Right.
which I understand. That's a company law philosophy and thinking. But in the meantime, it in that cycle, that individual can get hung up in that wheel and never be able to get off of it. And so I think if we could do we're going to keep our program in place. If you want to apply for this, you can, but we're not going to cut you off in 6 months after this money's spent, because it's leaving them out in the cold in 6 months that I could get cut off and I can't afford it. Now, I'm always for everybody being able to afford what they're using, but sometimes you got to look at it and go, how can I help my neighbor?
This funding clearly benefits both the customer and the organization. The money comes to us, and then we credit the accounts. So
Right.
this money never actually goes to the customer. It just
Right.
gets credited to their account. So it represents not only assistance for the customer, it represents revenue for us that we might not otherwise get.
Right.
So it does clearly do that. And I mean, you bring up a good point, Mr. Hippel. A day of reckoning is coming. You know, When that is I guess ultimately up to the board. You know, it's just, I guess my feeling at this point is that this is not the appropriate time for that day of reckoning. The relief program requires that utilities allow repayment programs for customers that have become delinquent because of COVID for at least 6 months and up to 24 months. We have historically been very lenient with our customers that become delinquent, work with them to cut off is the absolute last resort. But having said all that, you know, there is a day of reckoning coming at some point, and because our delinquency is 1% over revenues, you would still have the authority if you wanted to at some point to say, okay, now we are gonna go forward with disconnects. I mean, you have that ability. Again, I just don't. I think the day is coming when that may be necessary. I just don't think the timing
Now.
is right for it to be now.
Now, can we get that benefit of that COVID funding, but keep the moratorium in place at the same time? So we're not going to cut you off.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you can apply, and we can educate the public, say, you're delinquent, you can apply for these funds, and we'll apply it to your
Yes.
account.
Yeah.
But we're not going to cut you off.
Right. That's really I think the intent of the law.
Yeah.
I think it's a little odd that they picked this 1% number that basically everybody can opt out if they.
Right,
if
and I
they
think
want
that's a
to,
dangerous
but-
thing that, you know, especially right now. And there may be a time that we have to make that decision, but I don't think the time is today.
And we still will get the same amount of CARES Act money regardless of whether we go forward with the, you know, keep the moratorium or lift it. You know, the only question is, would we be able to spend more of it if the moratorium were lifted? But
I'd be more worried if I was that person, if I was educated and that I could get these funds to pay this bill. That would relieve me. If I realized that I can get these paid, but I may be cut off in 2 months, that would scare me. I'd much rather have it, the fact that, hey, I'm behind, okay, and here's an avenue you can pay this debt off. And it won't come to you, it'll come directly to us, we'll take it off your bill, you'll be back to zero, everything will be fine. But I've still got that, okay, I've got kids in the house and all that, I got aging parents, I'm not gonna be cut off in this process while I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do for a living. That's the way I'd like to see it.
So I'll just say that for me, I would accept your recommendation that we apply for the funding, but that we not revoke our suspension of disconnect, and hope that we can convince people that this is to their benefit.
Right.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, that's helpful feedback. Thank you. And that's all I had for.
Let me ask a quick question, though. I mean, is there, I would assume you get if there's an account that's in, I mean, just getting way out of, like, before, it was delinquent prior to COVID, it's still delinquent. I mean, there's a way to see who's become delinquent during
Yes.
COVID and somebody that was,
Yes.
so,
That's correct. Yes, Ms. Larson. Yes,
So-
because the delinquency, if there was if the delinquency was before March, then it's a different. It's
okay.
a different situation.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
And I've probably also, I think I specified this in the memo. This all only applies to residential. So,
Okay, good.
I don't
Ready
have
for you?
anything, I don't have
Okay.
anything further.
Very good. Well, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn until 5 PM on December 8, 2020 for the regular meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Powell, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Larson. Mr. Ippel. Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye. We
right. Thank
are
you all.
adjourned. Thank you and happy.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Can we take about a 2-minute, real quick break and then come back to? Our next presentation is the street sign replacement program. At Austin and Kim Hazelwood, you are on.
Yeah, good evening, Chairman Eisenhower, members of the board, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman. We are both here to speak about the current street sign replacement program that we have kind of designed in-house and carried through. The purpose of this program is to identify a systematic process to evaluate our current signs, which are the green reflective signs that have the street name that the county is responsible for maintaining, and for damaged, missing, or faded signs throughout the county. Kim and I worked together to create a process on how we're going to tackle the replacement of the signs that are in need.
Hi, I am Kim from James City County in the GIS mapping office. So General Services came to us to get an online application instead of having to write it on a piece of paper and then come back and try to put it into a database. So their main goals were to use a cell phone or a tablet, have a drop-down pick list, so there's no typing involved and everything is consistent with the pickings of the conditions of the signs. And once the data is back into the office, it's easily manipulated. So we went through a couple of different apps to figure out which one was the best one for them. There are a lot of options online now with mapping that you can do a lot of, in the field options, and then you can bring it back to the office without having to make it 2 steps. On the right is the app that's on the phone. The first screen is not on here, and it's actually the map. So they drive out to the field and they stop. They can put a point on the map. Once they put the point, they pick whether they need to, replace a sign or fix a sign. And once you pick choices, other questions come up in this app. So it's pretty easy for them to just pick, put the sign on the dot, on the map. And then that dot is in the GIS system when it comes back to our office. So we don't have to draw the point in. So it's helpful for us. They're out in the field doing it for us.
So we started this spring with our major, obviously, artery of Route 60 and Route 30 that are currently in the county. By June, we completed all the necessary sign replacements all along that route. So the next decision was to go to the rest of our major primary roads, what we kind of deem primary roads, with the list: Jamestown Road, Green Springs Trail, Long Hill News, Centerville, John Tyler, Forge, and Monticello. Those were all evaluated. We have ordered the signs, and we have actually received those replacement signs and are in the current process of replacing all of those areas. As of today, we're actually almost complete. August 2020, like I said, the signs began. Breakdown of the cost of one intersection. And just to let you know, these are the green reflective signs, the smaller ones. They're not the ones up on the poles. Those are maintained by up on like a traffic light, that kind of stuff. It's the smaller ones. You see the price of each. There is obviously the intersecting road is on top and the major road would be on the bottom. So that's total replacement. It does not have shipping charges on there because we usually order in bulk and we're not just ordering 1 or 2 signs at a time unless it's deemed an emergency.
So once Matt finishes the collection of the data, we can bring it back into the GIS system and obviously do the manipulation of all the data and bar graphs, pie charts, and so forth. Spreadsheet.
So the next steps in our process this fiscal year, we have $4,000 budgeted in street sign replacement. We've already spent through a little bit of that on majorly this go around is more. We have to save amount of money for damaged signs, ran over signs, or anything that can happen to them. The next step is now we're to the process of evaluating our ranking developments in our neighborhoods. Some of the neighborhoods do have the county maintained signs. Other neighborhoods opted out of those signs. So we're in that current process of deciding where we go from here. And once we figure that out, then we will continue the scheduling and the funding of those neighborhoods after that. Questions?
I have a question. If you're living in an area that has several different roads and they have no signs, what would that neighborhood do to, you know, we've got signs of our own that we've put up, but to have the county signs, what will we have to do in that neighborhood?
That's private. You talking about where you live?
Uh-huh.
That's private road, so I don't know how that
County
works.
doesn't do anything with that.
Well, for that, I mean, when those questions arise, usually Kim and I work together and we determine is it a public roadway, a VDOT maintained roadway that is already in the system. So as a private, I am unsure of that.
I mean, I know
We do
Thompson
not.
Lane is private and there's a sign for Thompson Lane.
Right.
So I don't know how that works. That'd be under general services.
Is there a way that if the neighborhood wanted to pay for the signs, county signs, you know, to match, you know, but basically for fire and EMS and that sort of thing? You know, it's always been, everybody knew who lived where, but, you know, you're getting newer people in fire and EMS and police that don't know. Billy lived on the corner there and Jimmy lives, you know, down past the cow pasture. You know, they don't know that type of thing where, you know, the old folks always knew what was what and, you know, and that sort of thing around the upper end of the county. So would it be an option that if citizens had, like mine, had an area that was private, even though our road's 100 and some years old, they could apply to the county and say, hey, if we pay for the sign, can we get signs to match, you know, the road signs, reflective signs out in the county?
Option. We haven't run into that, but we could definitely look at that and see what we could,
Okay. All right.
I know there
I'll
are
ask-
green signs on private roads.
Yeah.
I know there are.
Yeah, there are. There's certain
Yeah.
roads have them and,
Yeah, there's some on Lake Powell and there's some,
Yep.
definitely Thompson Lane.
Yep.
And,
So there's a few out in the
Yeah.
county, but, you know, not many, but, you know, it's a question of, you know, it might be that they, you know, our neighborhood says, hey, we'd like to, you know, purchase the signs and so they match everything else and they're easiest spot for fire and police and EMS. Okay, thanks. Me too. Wish I could get one.
I had to work on that today, is the only reason that came to my head. I promise you.
I didn't want to say anything bad.
Excuse me?
Much for that.
Do we know how many signs are out there?
We know how many signs we collected for the main arteries, but we haven't gone through all and.
I'm just kind of curious as to if we had an estimate of the life of a green sign.
At first, when I first started the app, I was like, well, I'll put the dots on the map for them. Then they have to just click on the dot and then they can just go through. But then I'm like, is it on this side of the street?
Yeah.
Are there two? Or are there just one for the whole intersection? So it's easier for them to go out and collect the dot and then it's in the system. But
That is the point of the app too, is we are collecting a database to that because we do have a large sign rack out at the yard, our popular roads that for whatever reason, the signs come up missing or damaged all the time. We keep an inventory of those. So it helps us on which inventory to keep on site.
Of that $4,000, how much would we expect to go toward replacement of signs that are damaged in a given year?
Rough guesstimate on a typical year, probably $2,000 to $2,500. You'd be surprised on how many signs we are replacing on a weekly basis out there. And
those are just, I mean, those are not because of fading or things like that. It's all just accidents.
a few of them could be fading. A lot of our process of taking out the faded ones, that was one of the big reasons because the reflection was gone on them and they couldn't be seen. A lot of them is accidents and sorry to say theft. And then our first responders and the police department and everybody, a lot of times they will alert us when something is missing. And then through our work order system also, the general public has a way to contact us to change those too.
And I really wasn't kidding about the size of the lettering on signs. Are we evaluating the question of whether the Line lettering is,
Reflective letter, probably,
Years ago, yeah.
yeah, so, I know, I believe one of you had brought that, reflective lettering up. And so we switched over to that lettering going forward. So, you know, those are some of the other things. If there's things left over and we'll try to incorporate that into our more comprehensive plan to get all of the signs to that type of font and reflective material.
I think John's more interested in the size of, yeah, the size of them so he can
I'm
see
sorry.
them. Any of us can see them, not John, just John. But I know, you know, we.
how many glasses should I put on?
We may want to do a survey of the fire department and EMS and the police department and say, hey, when you're zipping down the road, that's the most critical time to find that sign. Does that size fit? Or do we need to look at, as we replace them, going to a little bit larger sign? And I know our fire, police, and EMS can definitely tell you when they're flying down the road, you know, what actually stands out to them and what's like, oh, slow down. Oh, no, go to the next one. You know, even though we've got GPS telling us darn near everywhere to go, but sometimes it gets lost at, you know, my area up there.
And that's critically important, but we also have a demographic in our county of old residents who.
Yep.
I think that's what we had talked to Cluster and a few last change. That font was bigger than what we had at that time. So I mean, I'm getting old, I can.
Might have to go for
Might
the
not zip
billboard
as
font.
fast as police, but I'm, you know, clocking it pretty good some days, so, you know, might help. Look at that for.
Thank you very much. That's a
you all.
good project.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
I wanted to say how surprised I was at the work that they did.
Yes.
And the effort they put into it, because when Mr. Stevens asked for us to, you know, look at replacing signs, we were all like, you know, this is gonna be a task, but those two got together and they came up with that app, and I was really impressed how quick the process went, so I appreciate all their hard work.
A neat app.
Yes,
Thank
thanks.
you all.
Good job.
Thanks, Kim. Matt.
Happy
Good
Thanksgiving.
job, team.
Next, we are going to discuss retaining walls. Mr. Holt.
Are the exciting world of retaining walls.
I wish you'd had in your report the one that generated all this.
I didn't want to call anything out too specific. And per the last conversation, I'm putting my glasses on so I can see what we're talking about. Here, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. As you'll remember, this past February, the Board of Supervisors adopted an initiating resolution directing staff to study potential amendments to the county code to provide for enhanced engineering, review, and approval procedures for certain retaining walls. As expressed at that meeting and in subsequent discussions, very tall retaining walls can create safety issues and concerns, especially in residential areas where small children live and play. Very tall retaining walls can also create significant liabilities for homeowner associations, especially in terms of costs and potential damage events should a retaining wall fail. And lastly, as mentioned in the memo, very tall retaining walls do not help protect community character or protect the historic and rural character of James City County. After a review of other codes in the state, potential options for moving forward could include one of three options. The first one, limiting the total height of retaining walls as a firm design requirement in the county code. And with that, there could be no exceptions or options for allowing a taller wall or taller heights. Second option could be limiting the total height of retaining walls as a design requirement in the county code and allowing taller wall heights only as may be approved by the Board of Supervisors. So conceptually, this could be like through a height waiver application. You all work through those from time and again. Third option we identified could be creating design standards within the code that would allow for taller wall heights, but with certain performance and design criteria and design standards designed to help mitigate safety, cost, and community character concerns. Wall designs that follow these performance and design standards could be approved administratively. So hypothetical code text for this example could be something analogous to, should the overall height of a retaining wall exceed 6 feet, the retaining wall should be broken into multiple stepped walls with a minimum horizontal separation between the wall segments of at least 3 feet. And within your memo and on the screen here, I've showed a couple of those representative examples of what that would look like. So today, staff would appreciate the board's thoughts and direction on this matter, which would help us with drafting up next steps and possible code amendments for your consideration in the near future.
Well, a question for you on the third option, which is the performance standard. You talk about, and I looked at, if you go back a couple of, one slide to the previous, you said if the height exceeds 6 feet, that it would have to have a separation between stages of 3 feet. These, you can see the one on the right, the bottom right, is like, it comes up about a foot or two and it comes in about 4 or 5 feet, and it's a fairly low gradient at a low angle. It seems like what you were talking about, 6 feet up, 3 feet back, is a pretty steep angle.
It could be. It's just a representative example.
It's representative, okay.
Sure.
Because the pictures, depicted here are much preferable to one wall of, the total height.
The 6 and 3, there are not very many communities that we found in the state that have any design requirements at all. The 6 and 3 we pulled from Albemarle.
Okay.
That's about the only other one in the state that we could find. So again, it's just a representative example, and we would look to calibrate that here for this.
Well, I think this, this was very important to me because in Newtown was and of course there were other places we had retaining walls, but the one in Newtown was absolutely staggering to me. That thing must have been about 30 or 40 feet high, and it was very close to residential areas. So,
Is that the picture that's out there?
yeah, but
But it was close to it in concept. Yeah.
and so your second option where you would have a maximum height and then above that height waiver was what I was sort of thinking about when we started this, but I've become more interested, I think, in your third option, which is performance, things that could be administered, done administratively as opposed to requiring an action of the board if it accomplished what we were trying to accomplish. So I'm not totally sure about the 6 and 3 or whatever, but I sort of like the idea because what it does is it keeps us out of the business of having to grant height waivers or stuff like that, but it basically sets down some design criteria which effectively I think would preclude some of the problem areas we've had in the past. And I guess that's sort of to you, how comfortable you are that what we would, if we went that way, that we would effectively set up a system that would in fact preclude some of the problems we've had in the past.
I think it should go a long way. One of the I guess cons to the height waiver piece is a lot of the traditional applications that you all consider as a height waiver can be done on a conceptual basis. Before there's a bunch of engineering put into place, you can go off of an elevation, say, of a steeple or a cupola or something like that, or an amusement attraction, say. With the retaining walls, there's a lot of engineering to try to understand what's going on with the grade of the site and the development conditions. So really under that option, it would require an applicant or a developer to invest a little bit, much more so than they're used to, before they come and are able to get the final answer. So, the idea I think that Albemarle put into place is there is sort of that known expectation. They can engineer from that. They can plan out their site from beginning and have that, and then they go with the project. And I do think with an example like this, that would prevent some of the your walls from being designed like the ones we're seeing now that we're having problems with.
With some of the walls, I know all the examples we have here, they're all, in a product that's not going to rot. I know that some of them get built with timbers and that sort of thing, and that's 15 years, maybe 20, and they're starting to deteriorate and there's starting to be problems and everything else. And that's a significant problem on whoever buys the property and owns it. There may be something on materials used on the walls. There also ought to be, I know we had this issue with the service authority, where the wall was built right on the line, and then to repair it had to be into the service authority. Even the temporary repairs had to block all the pipes in the service authority area in order to hold it up long enough to repair the wall while the owner was worried of his house gonna slide down the hill. You know, because that wall was definitely failing, but, you know, there ought to be an amount of where you can get equipment behind this wall if there's a failure or when there's a failure. I think over in Colonial Heritage, we have quite a few large walls in that neighborhood, and there's been a lot of fill. Growing up in those woods, I know what they are. And so, you know, that may be an issue down the road, but I think the taller walls we get, if they're engineered by a good engineering company and they watch, you know, it's supposed to be compacted every 8-inch lift, it would be a good wall, but sometimes it gets missed, I think, not on purpose. I wouldn't think anybody's doing anything, you know, that they're out there building, trying to get the thing up and trusting that they're doing a great job. But, you know, that problem ends up on someone else later down the road. So I think a stair stepping, you're going to eat up more land. Of course, as you stair step. And sometimes depending on the hill, how quick you can catch up. If the hill's going up, you may not ever catch up stair stepping. You may eat up the whole property trying to catch that slope up the hill. So there's, you know, it's, I don't want to make it so that it's impossible to build on some of these lots, but also don't want to make it so that it's an issue for whoever takes it over. I know that some of these walls are engineered and they're parking lots. Today they're a parking lot, and 15 years later, you know, somebody may want to put an outbuilding there or a little garage or something. All of a sudden now the loads are different. So the load was calculated X, now it's Y, and you know, now they're starting to have a problem, but they didn't know they would because it's a retaining wall. I guess I can build whatever I want on it, you know, and it's just not knowing, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just not knowing. And then we always have the issue with retaining walls as far as moving the water behind them. That creates the most damage to them, is making sure that we have, you know, enough drainage behind that wall in order to get that water off there, because the more that it sets there, the more damage it does to the wall. So my biggest thing would be more of, if we do have to repair, if somebody does have to repair this wall, can they get behind this wall? Is there access to this wall to repair it? Because some of these homeowner associations, it's right on the line, and they can't get behind it. Now, I'm not letting them back here, not tearing my place up because of that wall. You know, and then it's a legal battle of, or you got to work from above, then you got to move all the dirt out and everything else to rebuild the wall, and it's expensive. These walls are not cheap to build, and you know, they're very expensive if they're not maintained. So there's quite a few issues on retaining walls that, you know, just small ones, but can add up to a big fee to the owner, whoever ends up with that property.
And those are good items to include in the performance criteria. Sure.
So the, this one in the example, is there a fence required at?
There is. The building code requires that. I can't remember off the top of my head what that distance is off of the grade, but I could find that out.
Because I thought that the one that was part of the issue with the one in the settlement at Powhatan, it's one very similar, and there wasn't a fence required. Or the developer, maybe there was one and the developer didn't do it, but.
It would have to do with that elevation off the ground for when one becomes required. Check into that.
So, I mean, I can live with 3. I would prefer 1, but I can live with 3.
My general tendency to prefer that we get a final pass at it. But I think, to me, retaining walls are sort of like grinder pumps. They're devices to help you overcome nature. And so I wouldn't object to going with design standards that were very rigorous, that made the developer rethink the question of whether the retaining wall is the right way to go, or they might need to rethink their development plan. I think that's where
I'll agree, because I've noticed several times came up in land use cases. Always an attempt to try to put something where the topography normally wouldn't allow it unless you change the topography substantially. And over in village, asked them to go back and take a look at it, because they were trying to build buildings right up onto retaining walls, and we asked them to get rid of some retaining walls and to back off on it, and they did, and it worked out much better. So, but I think that I'm okay with the number 3, the design standards. Pretty rigorous. Needs to be to where you are still respecting the lay of the land to a greater degree than people are right now. Other questions for him?
One more. We may want to look at too, Paul, the flow and the volume of water across the tract of land that may gather behind the retaining wall, and how that might affect it. And, you know, and the engineers can tell you, hey, with this flow and impervious cover or not, you're going to get X amount against this wall. That's going to add, you know, X amount of hydraulic pressure behind the wall. I know they take it in calculations, but it may be, okay, when that water is released off that wall or goes around that wall, what's it do downhill from there?
Other questions, comments? Bill, you've got an adequate direction from us, sir?
I do. That definitely gives me enough, and to your point earlier, we'll bring back a couple other alternatives and some more layers of detail for your additional consideration.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay.
Happy
Next
Thanksgiving.
on the agenda, we have solid waste consolidation. Grace Boone.
Chairman Eisenhower, members of the board, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kensman. I'm here this evening to speak to you about solid waste consolidation. We meant to get in front of you long before now, but with budget and COVID, you know, it's really our first opportunity, so apologize for not getting back to you sooner. Wanted to give you a little background. At your board work session last November, the students from William and Mary Masters in Public Policy program conducted a research project on solid waste consolidation and presented their findings to you all. Supervisor McLennan had recommended the research project on this particular service, as we had recently implemented our fee-based recycling program. The students provided advantages, disadvantages, alternatives, and what some of the legal constraints. So I just wanted to remind you some of the pros that they had talked about were, you know, having one contractor in neighborhoods, so fewer trucks on the road, less neighborhood disturbance, ensure that the vehicles in the program were properly inspected and safe operating. I know, Ms. Larson, you had mentioned that was one of your concerns last fall. Combining trash and recycling fees, maybe this could be a one-stop shop, so we're not doing billing system. But I did want to give you a brief update on our recycling program. So we're a year and a half into the program. There's approximately 14,250 county residents participating in curbside recycling. That does include the residents in Kings Mill. But this fiscal year, our average in the James City County recycling is 12,436 participants. Our contamination rate is low. We feel like the people that are participating are recycling more responsibly, so that they understand what's going in, what needs to go into the can in order for it to, make it through to the proper destination. Furthermore, we've seen an increase in our drop-off recycling at our convenience centers. We feel the program is stable, and we're comfortable with our progress. So we're looking for different ways to continue to build, the program also. Another one of the pros to consolidated trash is it discourages illegal dumping. It discourages piggybacking on your neighbor's trash can. So you might be paying for it, but someone else might be throwing their trash in there. And then there's possibilities for operational reductions. If we put this in place, we may not need as many convenience centers, or we change the way we're operating those centers. Maybe they just become recycle centers themselves. So, there's options out there if we do move forward with that. Some of the cons, public concerns, pushback from citizens, because we are eliminating their right to choose. We've seen a lot of pushback with the recycling program. It's just something. Establishing a billing system. So we're currently using a system through the treasurer's office. It is not a utility billing system and does have some limitations. A true utility billing system would need to be in place for a service of this magnitude. We have spoken with JCSA on their future plans for a utility billing system, and they're at least a few years away from implementing something like that. As you know, they are currently using HRSD, and their customers are, and their customer billing, they're only providing service in the PSA. And then some of the cons would be, how would we finance it? Is it an increase in taxes? Do we establish a fee? How do we handle current contracts with haulers? And then HOAs and gated communities, what does that look like? And then, of course, legal obstacles. So what we are recommending today is for your support to pursue an RFP for a solid waste study. This comprehensive study will provide alternatives, true price points, and recommendations for your consideration. With that, we have listed some of the items we would like the consultant to consider during the study. So should we make this study voluntary or mandatory? Contractors find a mandatory program more attractive, and participants can receive better pricing at that point. Looking at the fee-based or pay through taxes. Should the program be performed by a contractor or internal staff? If in-house, we would need to hire staff, and we would need to purchase or lease equipment. And then offer the program inside the PSA only or to all residents, possibly charging a different price inside the PSA versus outside the PSA. And then we would direct the consultant to involve the community in this process. I know that was some of the conversations last fall was education, and that involvement is critical in something of this magnitude. If you approve for us to move forward with this study, our plan would be to complete the study before June of '21. We would present it to you in July, and then this would be well ahead of the '23-24 budget. So we have another half years on our recycling contract. So this does give us some time to look at things and you know, maybe time that to where we make a bigger transition. But that's the ask today is, oh, thanks, Adam. That's the biggest ask today. So do you have any questions?
How much is the, when you put the RFP, what do you estimate it will cost to do this study?
I received a rough estimate of 100,000.
When, are we gonna also, if we are to go down this road, and while we're in the exploratory, the solid waste study, I think one question that always comes up is after a storm and the debris. And York County, for example, that's never an issue because they do this. They provide trash collection. So they go out and collect storm debris after every storm. Is that something that we would take on as well if we go this route? Would that be part of the services that we would offer?
I think that should definitely be part of the study. You know, we do have a bulk program now, but we would ask for that information also. So we have the opportunity to, you know, ask for multiple things and see what the consultant would come back with. So they would look deeper into what York's program is, Newport News, and those other jurisdictions around us.
Ms. Larson, to your point, I think there are a lot of solid waste services you could provide, and we can talk with other communities. I think a consultant would bring in things that are going on around us that make sense, whether it's bulk collections at the curb. You know, people just put it outside their home. We pick it up at no charge or a charge. Your regular leaf collection, limb collection, it all comes at a cost, but you certainly, as you get into the business and have that infrastructure in place, you can provide whatever service the community wants. It's just, do they want to pay $14 a month or $25 a month, because there is a cost to that increased level of service. But I think you'll have a lot of opportunity for what you'd like to consider. I think that's, to Grace's point, the valuable part of the input from the public, so that we make sure we're providing a service that really is needed within the community. And certainly after storms, I think that's a need we've heard time and time again, that we want the ability for the county to do the bulk pickup, and we would be better positioned to do that.
I would be in favor.
I've got a dozen questions, but I'm not going to answer them now. I'm going to hold them for the consultant. Will the consultant meet with this board initially and get our opinions and what we're looking at for our districts out there, as far as, you know, because some of our districts are all within the PSA, some of them part of the PSA, some of them not in the PSA, and so we get a multiple pile of questions, and it'd be nice for, you know, one of the work sessions to be the consultant, you know, meets with us, and we let them know that this is what we're thinking, these are the questions we're asked, these are the sign with York's trash, and if they pick up, do they pick up in the PSA and outside the PSA, or just within the PSA when they have a storm event? You know, and things like that. I would like to ask the consultant to check into these things, so that, you know, they may be better prepared for questions that at the end that we may ask, and it'll get them a chance to get it up front and get us. And so I'm not going to ask you all the questions I've read now, because, you know, we need to get the consultant in to, you know, get them to delve into these matters and figure out. But I think we're moving in the right direction to do a one-stop shop for all of this. I think it's going to help us tremendously.
And frame that up like we did the space needs study, and have them come in and speak with you up front, so they can, for them.
That'd be great.
I would
Thank you.
concur with Mr. Hippel, because I think the inside-outside PSA issue is going to be something that we need to really be prepared to address, because it's all over the place in the county. So we need to make sure that we keep it as fair as possible for everyone, but be prepared to answer a lot of questions. Thanks.
And I'd certainly support the consultant study as well. Obviously, one of the issues that I'd be very concerned about is the impact on currently existing county businesses. Make sure the way to address the impact that this would likely have on the.
Definitely, because we talked about that originally on, and maybe that's something the consultant can help us with. How do we transition the people who have always been faithful to us as far as providing this service, and it may be they can adjust to it, or it may be their business model may need to change in some way.
So
But-
I did reach out to, Minister's office, and she was going to check with me, what they know of how many contractors are still operating.
But as I understand it, one of the impacts of this would be that in residential neighborhoods, if we were providing county service, that we could then regulate burning to a trash in some neighborhood.
Okay. Chris, you got the sense of the board, so I think we're ready to go with that.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, and fifth item on our board discussions is capital improvement plan discussion. Stevens.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I have provided two handouts, one being something that has some red and green coloring on them, red, green, and yellow. We talked about this at your May work session and created this chart as we were discussing our FY20 and prior year CIP projects. Due to the uncertainty with the financial impacts of COVID-19 at the time, we had delayed many of our prior year projects, trying to hold on to the cash that these projects represented that is currently within our accounts. We created the spreadsheet as indicators, and the red, yellow, green projects we had committed to you would not move forward without board approval. And you have approved a few of those that I've indicated that were in yellow at various times since then, where you have awarded a project or allowed us to move forward with whatever the item was. I'm really back this evening as our financial uncertainty related to COVID has improved. I would like to allow departments to begin working on the prior year projects as their schedules allow. It doesn't mean they all will happen at one time, and it does not mean that they won't be reevaluated as we get into the project details. But I do have a comfort level at this point to move forward, and wanted to see if you as a board are okay with us releasing these projects and letting them go forward. Many of them would come back to you or will fall off this list as we go forward in time, as they would have in their natural progression, but didn't know if you had concerns with that or want to go a different route in terms of releasing the balance of the yellow and red projects.
Totals on the bottom down here are for the yellow and the red. It looks like 11 million in yellow and a little over 5 million in red.
Yes, and the yellow would have been reduced by about the $3 million project related to the marina, so that would take it to 8. So there's about $1.6 million project related to the Chickahominy Riverfront project, so that would bring it down a bit more, and the Brickyard purchase of about 1.4 million. So really that 11 million is about 5. So we're talking about $10 million or so in projects, and again, a few of those. Of the larger ones would come back to you with certainty, such as you have a land facilities that we had $1.6 million in an account that is yellow. So that is one that the board would see that before we would spend that 1.6 million. So you're talking in probably the 8 million or less, and you will still see a number of those projects as they come or move forward over time. And again, they all wouldn't happen in January or February. It would just let the departments sort of plan around their urgent needs or the needs they think are most pressing and work towards those as they would have done prior to COVID.
Now and this is all projects would have been slated regardless. We're not borrowing any funds or anything else. This is all projects that were in our plan to, if our year had been normal like it was years ago, we would have just continued with these. Some of these projects would have might have been completed by now.
Some of them probably would have been completed. Some of these probably were funded 3 and 4 and 5 years ago. In some cases, such as the marina project you just awarded, we had put aside money every year for a number of years until we had the balance so we could award the project. So some of these projects have been around for many years, which is our FY20 and prior year titling. I don't think any of these are borrowed funds. I think these are all cash in the bank that we've had in those prior budgeted years set aside for this purpose. I will confirm that and let you know, but I feel very comfortable in telling you that these are all cash in the bank projects that are ready to, the money's there when we're ready for them to move forward.
Thought they were, just check on that.
Sure.
And also, down at the marina, now, is that totally closed off to?
The marina project that you just awarded, we did send out a notice. I think it said beginning next week, it will be closed to the public in terms of access down the main driveway. We have asked the boat owners and they have moved. The contractor, we had our pre-construction meeting on site today, or our staff did. The boats and the rental slips are all out of there. The ramp itself is closed. Today, you could still drive in and drive out. We will maintain access to Billsburg and maintain access for those that want to go around that have or renting slip from us under the covered slips that are not part of this first project. So there will still be access throughout the project, but the main area where people are used to driving in down by the water and parking there where the boats are moored, that will be closed to the general public during the construction time frame, which is expected to take us into late spring. So the Memorial Day weekend, the contractor hopes to have that area completed and reopened, and then to finalize the project down just past the boat ramp and the bulkhead work there by July time frame.
And I've had a few people that have gotten the ramp rental for the year, and then through Facebook realized that it's closed. And some of them are duck hunters that use that as an access to get out to duck hunting.
Okay.
And they called me and said, hey, we can't use we paid for it a year. I wish I'd have known it when I paid for it. And because now I've paid for something that I can't use. So I said, let me check on that and we'll see.
I'd be happy to, I'll follow up with you. I'm sure if you hear from them, if they would reach out to our Parks and Rec staff, we will make that right, whether it's extending that or whether it's refunding the portion of the year that they're unable to use. But I will get that information to the board as well, so you have that. But I'm sure we would make that right because we didn't know ourselves that we were going to award the project until October. And so anybody that bought paid for that in August or September, we wouldn't have been able to guide them one way or other to know if we were going to make the award until we brought it to the board.
And that's what I told them. I said, we just awarded it, so it moved very quickly. Is there any chance that, and they asked me, was there any chance that the duck hunters that have a pass could still go in and out of there and use the ramp?
The challenge will be coordinating the dredging and then the dock work that's going on. So we wouldn't have docks. We would have, so the dredge will be in the way some of the time. And I think it's a fairly narrow basin is what I was told by the contractor. So I think it will create some challenges. The dredging is meant to be the early part of the work. So I don't know if that takes them a month or 3 months in terms of the dredging part. But I think if that is done, the docks are all pulled out, we could reevaluate it, but just there wouldn't be any place for them to launch their boat from. There'd be the slab of concrete going into the water is not changing, but all the docking beside it, that you would want to walk on so that you're not in the water, that wouldn't exist. So I don't know that there's much opportunity during the construction for access there. We certainly would honor that at our Chickahominy. It's just a long way by boat if you were trying to come out of the marina
On
areas.
a cold morning.
Yes, sir. So I don't know that I have a good solution to that. I will talk with our Parks and Rec director and see if there's anything else, maybe some other reciprocal arrangement we could have close by, but I will look into that and let you know. I don't think our facility will be very available until it's done. And I think, again, that will be the Memorial Day weekend timeframe.
And have the ducks been informed of these developments?
Yeah, they're landing more in that area now.
So, Mr. Stevens, if you're looking for guidance, I'll say that I'm okay with what you're proposing here. I think that's great. We can move ahead with these things.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that. And again, many of those projects will come back before you before we would proceed anyhow, but that'll help our staff move forward.
While we're on the topic of CIP, I guess we're planning to meet with the school board and city council on the 4th of December on school CIP. I just wondered whether the board might have an appetite for this item. I understand that the school CIP does not prioritize early childhood education, the pre-K facilities that we've talked about before, because we haven't had a community conversation about it. I'd like to suggest that maybe we broach at that meeting the need to put together a task force of the city, county, and schools to address the need to provide facilities that would allow us to incorporate those children that currently are in need of services that are not being served by the school system, and then a more long-range plan to provide the option of pre-K for the broader community, so that we can make clear that there is an interest in getting this addressed, that it's a serious issue, and that it helps us relieve the pressure on elementary schools for elementary classrooms.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that because, you mentioned this, 3-4 years ago? We've been talking about this, and we finish our meeting, and we think it's a very productive meeting, and we lay things out of the direction we're gonna go, and then we end up with, here's a whole new list of whatevers. And I'm not saying the schools don't need certain things, but there's certain things we can afford and there's certain things we can take pressure off the schools. And I thought, and I might have been at a different meeting, that we agreed to do this last year. And now this year, we decided from the school board it's totally different. And I'm like, I don't know what happened in that CIP change within that process. But, we were just told today, you can count on having less money next year or this coming year than you had last year, it sounded like to me. It was a little hint from our delegation that said the funds are not going to be there. And I think you're right on it. I said it when you started this conversation years ago, and that we need to look at that and add on to these schools. And there was even a comment I heard from several citizens that I was in favor of the new school. Not at this time, I'm not. When we need it, maybe then we'll have that discussion. But no, not right at this time. I think what we need to do is do exactly what you're saying. Work on Bright Beginnings and get that pressure off the schools. I think that would help tremendously.
Well, and I think the other side to it, just to make sure that we don't lose this part of it, is simply that we have children in the community that are in need of the services, that are recognized as being in need of service that the schools can't currently provide.
Yeah.
And so, it's an important
That's where we
thing
need
for
to
us
start.
consider.
Well, here's the deal, though.
Yes, ma'am.
You can give them the money, but they decide how they're going to use it. That's the way the state
Right.
has it set up. There's a different conversation. Frankly, as I've had various conversations with the school board, it has been, perhaps you need to start talking to the General Assembly about getting taxing authority. Because we are in a no-win situation, because it comes out of our budget. We're responsible for the taxing, but we don't get a say on, we allocate the money. We don't get a say on, so we could say you're requesting X for an elementary school. We think you should build a pre-K center, so we're going to give you $30 million. And then they can just build half of an elementary school with that $30 million. They don't have to build a pre-K. So, I'm certainly not, I understand, I don't want people to erupt and say, but if we can't come to an agreement, I think it's very difficult. And I frankly have found it's so frustrating, especially during COVID.
Yes.
Because they get very angry about us sticking the camel's nose under the tent, but for us, it's when the rubber meets the road, and we're the ones that are on the front line for people who get very angry if we're going to have to raise revenue. So we are at an impasse, and we are at an impasse on this situation.
Well, but what the school board tells us, that it's because we haven't had the conversation, then let's have the conversation. let's go ahead and decide if this is, if there is a reason why we shouldn't be concerned about our failure to meet the needs of pre-K kids who are in need of services.
So I would say what they're probably going to say to, and maybe I'll be proven wrong on December 4th. I think they're going to say, well, we feel the need right now is more the elementary school than serving the pre-K. But I don't know. We'll see what they say.
But by serving the pre-K, it's gonna relieve the other. It's.
They say even in our school liaison meetings, what they say to us is, regardless, even if you take out Bright Beginnings out of the schools where they are, we still have a, I want to say occupancy, but that's not the right word. We still have a capacity. Thank you. We have a capacity issue.
And that's not what Future Think said. Now, the new Future Think is a little different than the last one that just got sent out like a month or so. The new one has changed a little, the latest edition. And I don't know how that changed or what changed that. But there wasn't that issue. Now all of a sudden there may be that issue. Now all of a sudden we may be using mid-level instead of lower level projections. And so, you know, how did that,
Gotten an update on that.
yeah, how did that difference in that Future Think come into play? And, you know, and if they're saying we haven't had this discussion, we were all there last year when we set this in place and said, these are the things we need to work on. And I agree with you. It's the most frustrating thing when you give somebody 52% of your budget and all of a sudden they can use it on anything they deem is necessary. And I'm like, I did this with school buses. School bus after school bus, we didn't buy them last year. Or we bought 2 out of the 10. We used the money for something else. And I can understand if it's an emergency or something going on, but we're held accountable to our citizens if we do not use the money the way we say we're going to use it. I think maybe then the citizens ought to hold the school board accountable if they don't use the money how it is supposed to be used, which is alleviating some of this pressure. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get a call from a couple school board members, but that's okay. I've had them before and I'll have them again.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's a situation that is, and speaking as a former, I mean, I think I've shared with you all that I kept, you know, I got
Yes.
so aggravated over the middle school issue, you know, former Board of Supervisor member who kept making us prove that we needed another middle school. So as you feel, no, it's not, you don't feel, you are charged with your responsibility is the schools. So therefore, they're gonna do the school. Our responsibility is the money. I mean, you either play real hardball where you say, okay, well, I'm not gonna give you anything. If you're not gonna, for example, we're not in favor of an elementary school, this board, and I'm just making that up, but you don't want to talk about a pre-K building, so when they bring that CIP forward, we say, okay, well, we're gonna approve 100 million, and you ask for 130 million, or 160 million, or whatever it is. I mean, that's what we get down to, because that's the only negotiations that they have to do what they feel they're charged with. We have to do what we're charged with.
right.
And so, and I understand people don't want, they don't want additional taxes. I just feel like this setup between schools and Board of Supervisors and city councils is just, it doesn't work. And it's very difficult to navigate. And, frankly, after our call with Jim Reginbald, I think one thing we ought to be working on is changing the name of the schools to James City Williamsburg.
Yeah.
Because really, I mean, we are the one, we
for James
we're
City.
driving the engine and, as far as financially go, appreciate the partnership with Williamsburg, but we're putting a lot of money into it. And so,
And and I can understand that as far as the General Assembly holding money or not putting enough into the school system, yes. But the school system also has to remember that, what was it, 105% more than we're supposed to be putting in? We're putting in, I think the number was at the meeting, 105% more. We're not putting a little bit in. We're putting a huge amount. But then when we say, hey, we want to be financially responsible, we want to make sure that this money goes into something that our citizens trust us to make sure that it is used, every penny we can use on something, then we're called out, and we have people calling us saying, you're not doing this for the schools, or you're not doing it. 105%? Give me a break. I'm proud of this board for doing that. And this board has never not supported our schools ever since I've been on it and before I was on it. And, but I think John's right. I think we ought to have a task force sit together and sit there and say, what is the need? And we need to agree on if this need, and we've got to be careful how we put this together. And what is this need? Really, what is the need? And we know from our side of it where the need is. Pre-K. It's plain and simple. I'm a blind man riding on a bicycle to see that.
Well, Mr.
But-
Hippel, to your point though, with the future thing, it's my understanding that at some point the numbers level out.
Yeah.
And the most recent future think projections still have kids coming out of age-restricted communities, including colonial heritage, which makes no sense to me. So until we can get our head wrapped around some of these numbers and where they seem to think we've got these numbers that are rising, and the future think is showing them leveling out, but still having kids coming out of neighborhoods where they don't have kids, the dots don't connect for me. So that's why I think, to your point, Mr. McGlennon's idea that he had, whenever that was, a while back.
At least 4 years ago.
He's been preaching it for a while, makes the most sense. So,
but we have to get them to agree
Right.
on a task force. And I mean,
but how do we do that if we can't even agree with what the
we're
projections
gonna let
are?
John finesse that, I guess. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a question of efficiency, certainly, but it's also a question of equity. I mean, we have children who are in need of services at pre-K. We've been offering pre-K services for years and years, but we're not meeting the need, the identified need in the community. And all we do is kind of keep converting elementary school classrooms into pre-K classrooms, which was not their intent. We could provide a better setting, a facility that really addresses the needs of these kids in a way that frees space for the elementary schools that obviously have expanded the kinds of services that they provide, have more kinds of space needs than they would have had before. But if you put pre-K kids into facilities that are designed around their needs, then you're in a lot better position from almost every perspective. You don't need an auditorium for a pre-K child. You don't need a media center. It's a different kind of experience.
If we catch them at an early age, all the stuff says the earlier we catch them and can grab hold of those children, the better they're going to be, and the easier it is going to be for them to understand education. And so, we definitely need to catch these little rascals as quick and as early as we can. And I don't know,
I hear both of you. I guess what I'm saying is it's unfortunately not our decision. To the point of, you could put together a task force, but they don't have to listen.
But
But it goes back to what I said about the budget.
And I don't, I don't like playing hardball or anything else and don't want to do that. I want to be a working relationship with the school board like we've always been. But sometimes, you got to say, hold on now. Hold on, the money's coming from here. You make the right decision. Good. I'm not telling you what decision to make, but you make the right decision and we can move forward with this. And if not, it may be up to the general public to then go during election, let's see what the decision's made.
But we are trying to tell them what decision. We're trying to tell them they have to build a pre-K building. So we are telling them that decision. So, but I don't even know what is on our agenda for our joint meeting.
I have not a clue.
Yeah, the superintendent will present, I think, their proposed CIP. They haven't adopted it prior to the joint meeting. My understanding is it's come through. She's discussed it with the school board. It's coming to the county and the city for discussion, and then they would approve it the following week, is what I understand.
Yeah, and it is very difficult, and I don't want to get in a bad spot with the city either. I mean, I have deep respect for the city, but we get into these joint meetings and it's equal, and it's not equal.
It's not.
We're 90%. I mean, I don't know the answer, and I mean, I want to hear, but it's 90% of it falls on us. So I don't know that's just me. Again, I don't want to get into a bad spot with my city colleagues because I have great respect for what they do, and they don't have the number of students. I understand that. We do. So, but joint meetings are, sometimes we need a James City County School Board meeting, a James City County with our James City County representatives to say, this is where we're coming from as a county. So, but.
Well, maybe we should have that meeting.
Yeah, maybe we should.
I don't think it would hurt for John to propose that we do.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Something like that. And like you say,
I'm not trying to do censorship.
no,
I'm just trying to say,
ultimately, if they don't want to participate, that sends the message all by itself. If they do want to participate, then the question is, what can we agree on? What can we agree on? Because and I know there's a tremendous frustration, but just like they have an obligation to deal with the educational side of it, we do have a fiduciary responsibility.
yes, we do.
And sometimes, what they might want to do doesn't necessarily make sense financially for us. And there are going to be times when we will disagree. But I think it's best to start from a position of can we sit down and try to see what kind of common ground we can come up with.
Right. The main objection has been that we have not had a conversation about this. Yeah. And so let's have a conversation. If there's a compelling,
I think the operative word
argument
is community conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe what we ought to do with this proposed task force would be to have the 3 jurisdictions, but also to engage the community in it.
Sure.
Well, I just know we've had plenty of meetings. And we've discussed this, and where anybody would think we haven't would be, I'm not even going to say it because it probably wouldn't be polite, but it wouldn't be true, because we have discussed this when you brought it up. I guarantee it was 4 years ago. And, for somebody to even think we've never had a meeting on this, we've never discussed this issue. And it's just, but we can discuss it again. I guess you got to discuss it 4 dozen times to get it across the fence.
But am I incorrect? If we were, so their CIP, if that was to be brought before us and we were to say $40 million, even if and maybe Adam, that's spelled out line item and we say, okay, we're approving $40 million, do they have to do it on the things that we've approved, or can they take that $40 million and do it the way they want to do it?
I'll at least take a stab and then really follow up with our finance director and make sure I'm giving you the right information. Adam can certainly correct me. As I understand, you have a couple options in terms of how you give money to the school system. You can give them basically approving their operating budget, and then that money is what you give them that year. And they do it monthly to us where they have the expense, they submit their expenses, and we reimburse them. And they're entitled to that amount of money through the year. So that is one way to do it, and that's the way we currently do it. You can also do it where you do it by category. You could say you have this much for this kind of activity, this much for this kind of activity, and so you're prescribing by activity is how I understand it. And our attorney's shaking his head yes with us, so I'm not so far off. And we can provide those activity centers and tell you what they are, but I think you can be more prescriptive with the money. You still can't nickel and dime that they're going to buy this bottle of water versus that bottle of water, but you can put it in buckets that say you get this much money in here. So I think you have some ability to control the expenses. You don't get to tell them what to spend it on, but you can tell them the area that you are providing funding for. I think today our CIP, excuse me, Mr. McGlynn, I'll be right back before I forget my thought. Today, you're due the operational side. The CIP money you're approving, but we're holding that project for project, and they're getting that as they go along. And I don't think they have as much latitude to move that around, but I'd have to verify that for you. Sorry.
No, there are also questions about, well, so where would a facility be? How do you get the land?
That'd be through us.
And there's that.
Just drop.
See where you're going, John.
But I don't think that's the most productive way to go about doing this. I think the most productive way is just to say, look, we understand the need to have premier facilities. We have great building facilities. Everybody agrees that they are excellent facilities, well maintained, and the thing that has always kind of gotten to me is just the idea that we are taking excellent facilities that were built for particular purposes and transforming them into less efficient uses of that space, less valuable use of the space, and that there must be a better way to do this that would serve not only the financial aspects, but actually the ability to provide the services that the children need. So, stop. I know I'm preaching to the choir.
Have we talked the CIP to death?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more?
Yes, sir.
I've got through the prior year numbers. I feel very good on my side. The school system, I think that was good discussion for the board to have. I also provided a handout that was a 1-page, 8.5 by 11, that had some color-coded items in them, and just want to make sure as we're preparing the 5-year financial forecast for you in January, my recommendation was we drop off 3 of the project, one being the water rescue boat that we received a grant for. You've approved it this year, so that won't be a need next year because that was approved this year due to the Port Authority grant. The other 2 were the marina land improvements. It was $4 million in your 5-year CIP, and the marina new building improvements. Again, that was a $4 million project. And those 2, one of them are Parks and Rec related, meaning the maintenance building, the boat repair shop, there was a bathroom, there was some parking, and some other improvements to the property. We're doing an awful lot with the Phase 1 improvements. Phase 2 of the marina improvements, I would recommend we leave there because I think that finishes the water access part of the marina. But I do believe the building, while in needing some repair, doesn't have to be replaced yet. I'd rather come back to you with a project that says we probably do need to build a restroom and we probably do need to add some structural component to our existing building, but I think you can do that for far less than the $3.4 million in that marina land improvement part. And so I'd like to say we're going to remove that from the 5-year CIP. We would reevaluate that during your budget process this year. And then the second, the marina new building was really meant to be the potential for us building a restaurant to entice a restaurant to come there. I think there could be some public-private partnership for that in the future where maybe we don't have to make as big an investment. You already have made a big investment in the property. You're improving the amenities around it. I hope that maybe we can not push that project away, but find somebody else that would make that investment and run that where we don't have to do that. And before we develop a 5-year forecast with that $7 or $8 million in or out, I just wanted you to be comfortable that my recommendation be we take it out. We could reevaluate it during your budget process, but at least for our January discussion, it wouldn't have an impact on that. Any concerns? Okay.
Concerns, but understandably
Yes, ma'am.
knowing what you're doing.
That's all I need, sir. Thank you.
Ready. Board requests and directives.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Just mention that I distributed to you all a couple of reports that were presented at the most recent Hampton Roads Combined Workforce Council and findings.
I just wanted to mention, if I could, a couple things. I wanted to mention Grace Boone, who there was a issue with the recycle truck. It dropped a bunch of glass, and I think from what I understood from Grace, though it was kind of crazy, we were standing in the middle of the street. I don't believe that's the recycle truck's. It's sort of a, is that on us to clean up, or would it just be, hey, there was glass drop, be careful? Okay. But I didn't know that at the time. When I reached out to Scott, I'd received a couple complaints, and I came upon Grace out in the middle of the street cleaning it up herself. So I want to give her a shout out. I want to also give John Carnifax a shout out because I get a lot of questions because we have some great facilities that are in my district. One being the marina. And so I get a lot of questions, a lot of time from people that are always asking about different things that are going on at the marina or different things that are going on at Chickahominy Front Park, and John is always so responsive, so I'm really appreciative of that. I saw this article in the newspaper, and so now I'm stepping in it, that really concerned me regarding the number of children failing. And I don't know the answer to this, but I think it does concern us as a county. I know COVID is, you know, I know we're waiting for a vaccine. I know there's so much uncertainty over COVID, but I'm hoping that we will start to see ourselves out of COVID. And, you know, one thing that we've always been, you know, we've been a quality community because we've had really quality schools. And I think other school systems are facing similar. I heard that another system in the peninsula had a failure rate of 25%. I've heard kids aren't coming to school, they're not showing up virtually. This is just a very worrisome issue to me. And, you know, I hope that Dr. Heron will touch on it at our meeting. You know, tell us what is the plan. You know, special ed have been in the classroom since, I believe, like the second week of September. I think elementary schools are in, Bright Beginnings. I know numbers are increasing, but we seem to have our hospitalization numbers were not the one hospital that you were able to report, you know, that the number was pretty low. We seem to be, you know, we're doing a little better job of dealing with it. I know there's a lot of uncertainty, but I'm hoping we are finding a way, hopefully in 2021, to at least get some of these kids back in the class, some of the moving some of the middle school and high school kids back in the classroom, or, you know, finding out a way to at least get them to get there virtually and to help bring some of these numbers down. So I just wanted, I know sometimes I take a little bit of personal privilege to talk about my kids, but I'm going to take a moment, if I could, on personal privilege to talk about one of my constituents. And his name is Kyle Kleiman. And I have known Kyle since he was probably a middle schooler. He was a real good friend of my cousin Randy's. And his wife, Catherine, is one of our Bright Beginnings teachers, and they have 2 kids. And Kyle is in need of life-saving liver transplant. And he needs a type O, and it could be a living donor. And so I just implore, if anybody is out there and this would be something that they would be called upon, that they might consider being tested for that. And if they reach out to me on my county email, I'm happy to try to get them information. If in the meantime, if you would just keep Kyle and his family in your thoughts and your prayers, and I know he'll be okay, but if we can help, and if anybody, even 2 people hear me tonight that might be able to help, that'd be great. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Up to you.
And happy Thanksgiving.
There are miracles.
There are.
Okay.
And there's one tonight.
One tonight, thank you.
I hope there are.
The only thing I
Have
will add is I do have a groundbreaking at 7 PM tomorrow night at King of Glory Church. They're having a service, and it's going to be outside, and we're going to turn ground for their new expansion. And I was very pleased to be invited to participate in that, since it's right out there in the back part of my district. So, and I guess we don't have anything else. Do you have anything else to add, sir? Okay. Then I will take a motion to adjourn until 9 AM on December 4th, 2020 for the joint meeting with the WJCC School Board and City Council.
Motion?
A motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel? Aye. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We are adjourned.